So I think this is maybe the third or fourth time that somebody from my team, either myself or someone else, has been here to present. And some of the information is, some of it's the same and some of it has changed. And I feel like over the last year, we've talked about regulations and leases multiple times. But because enough information keeps changing on it, it becomes important to revisit the topic. So I apologize if you feel like this is something that you've heard. There will be new information as part of it, but because things change so often and I don't know who has heard what, I am going to take it from the top, as we say, and talk about some of the regulations, not all of them, but some of the regulations that are impacting small businesses. And then just really briefly at the end, talk about leases, because an important deadline is coming up in March. So I am with the Small Business Legal Clinic at Lewis and Clark Law School. I am the director there, and we work with small businesses throughout Oregon. I'll talk a little bit more about the SBLC, as we call it, in just a few minutes. I'd like to start with a disclaimer. As lawyers are apt to do, this presentation is for informational purposes only. So if you're looking for what do I do with my business and my specific situation, you're going to want to consult with an attorney or possibly check with one of the regulatory agencies that are regulating some of these regulations so you can get information that's specific to your business and your situation. But this is going to give you an overview, give you some tools, and also give you some idea of where you can go to get that more specific information, including working with us if that so makes sense for you. So the Small Business Legal Clinic, we provide legal services to low-income, small and emerging businesses. So we work with lower income business owners, and we work on a variety of things. We don't just do COVID-19 work, although we've done a lot of it this last year. We've been around for about 15 years, and we do a lot of different things. So we provide transactional legal services. So we work on transactions, not controversy work, not litigation. So I often tell people if you're in a fight or with somebody else, or if you have an emergency, chances are it's not the kind of law that we practice. Rather, we're doing more of that relationship building work. So starting businesses, drafting leases, also looking at understanding what the regulations are if you're hiring employees, protecting intellectual property or things that you've come up with, like your brand or your logo, and making sure that's protected. And then regulatory compliance is what we've been doing a lot of this year, and mostly what I'll be talking about today. So let me get back to my screen here. I'm going to talk today about, as I said in the first one, the regulations and lease questions. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is county risk levels. And that's something that we haven't talked about with this group or really anywhere. And maybe some of you have already figured this out and are using the tools that the state has given, which I actually was pretty pleased with the tools that they've created. And I think that they're very useful. But before we were looking at different phases, now we're out with the phases. We spent many months talking about the phases. Now that's no longer how the state is figuring out what you can and cannot do. Now we have county risk levels. And this is an older picture, so this isn't what the current risk level is, but you can see that it's a fairly simple way to look at the map in that you have it broken down by county. If it's green in your county, it's a low, yellow is going to be moderate, orange will be high, and red is going to be extreme. And depending on where your county is, you have different things that you can and cannot do. And those are going to vary from industry to industry. And so it's really important to know, can you do what you want to do for your business, depending on what your county is currently at in terms of risk level. And so the way that they track that is they determine the county risk levels and they change it they revise every 2 weeks. So in order to check the status, let me see if I'm able to click on this and go to here. The best way to do it is just to go to the website itself. And are you able to, yeah, it stopped sharing. Okay, let me see if I can bring it back and share. Okay, let's see if it will let me share again. Okay, so when you click on that, you're going to end up seeing this website. And if you go down a little bit further, it talks about generally things that you need to do to try to reduce the risk of COVID. And then it goes to find the status of activities in your county. And that's really what I wanted to focus on. And so we can look at specific counties. And since we're talking about businesses in Washington County, I'll look at Washington County. And then it gives a pretty good long list of what you can and cannot do in Washington County. It says, first of all, it's high risk. So we know that we're at that. I think it's the red, but not the dark red on the map. And as a result, depending on that risk, it's going to tell you what you can do if you're a bar, restaurant, or brewery. It talks about what childcare operations, what that's going to look like. It talks about if you're talking about church or synagogue or mosque or other religious institution, drive-in operations. So all these different types of businesses, it's going to give you instructions specific to your county risk. And so you can say, for example, you can see, if we're talking about hair salons, it's allowed. There are no caveats to that. You're able to practice as long as you're following the general guidance. And we'll talk about the general guidance that doesn't change from risk level to risk level. And if you go up here, you can see if you're talking about bars, restaurants, breweries, and wineries, you are allowed, but there are quite a few regulations that you need to be following. So this is a great way to just quickly look, okay, what's the county that I'm in? What's the activity that I'm doing? And you can even specify the activity so you don't have to scroll down the whole list and say, okay, we can see that if we're talking about, like we mentioned before, hair salons, it's going to tell me what it is that I can do. And this is blocked, so I can't scroll down very well. So there you go. And it also will give you some frequently asked questions about those industries. So I find the tool to be fairly simple and fairly helpful. The challenge is, of course, then if you are following it and then suddenly you find out, oh, it's changed and what you were following before is no longer what you need to be following. So it's keeping up with what's the risk level of your county where you're working. So I'm going to come back here and start sharing. Okay, that's not right. All right. And as I said before, it's going to be changing every 2 weeks and you do get a bit of warning. So what they have decided to do is that they're going to update it every 2 weeks, and that's responding to how it's spreading in a community, and that it was going to stay at that risk level even if the spread has gone down. So you may say, oh, things are looking really good. Why hasn't my county risk level changed? And that's because they want to wait for 2 weeks before they move to a less restrictive phase. So on Tuesday of week 1, it's the warning week. So they're going to be telling you what the data of the previous weeks were so you can prepare for potential risk level changes. So this could be important, for example, if you're a restaurant and you're trying to figure out how much you're going to be buying in terms of produce for the following, for a period of time, you're going to have a little bit of warning in terms of, are you going to be opening up larger? Are you going to be shutting down more? What can you expect in terms of people coming to your restaurant? And then Tuesday of week 2 is called the movement week. And then they're updating the risk levels. And then it will say, okay, this is going to have a new risk level that's assigned. So you'll know what's going to happen the following week. So you should have a little more than a week, depending on how clear the warning week is. Now, what we've seen in actual practice is that things have changed more quickly than this. And for example, I know that in Multnomah County, a lot of restaurants were scrambling because they didn't get a full week and a few days. It was more like a little bit less than a week. And hopefully that was the state just getting their legs under them, and hopefully going forward, they will be following this, what they said they would be doing on their website. So you're going to have some advance notice about, oh, am I dealing with a different risk level than I was last week? All right. So those risk levels are newer in terms of we haven't spoken about those before. The next, and these are going to be, like I said, county dependent. The next set of regulations that I'm going to be talking about are not county dependent. And they are going to be in effect, and this was released in November, and it's continuing until May 4th, supposedly, and we'll see what happens. It may be extended, it may be changed at that point. And these regulations are specifically for people who are employers. So for all of you who have employees, this is where you want to be listening. And these are regulations that have been in effect for the last few months. So hopefully this is a review for all of you. And this, when it came out, we talked about it's not replacing anything, but it's working in conjunction with the other guidance that was already out there. If you don't have any employees, you don't have to follow the OSHA guidance. You're only following the OHA guidance. So there's two different sets of guidance, one for if you have employees and one if you don't. And if you have employees, you're going to be looking at both of them. And if you don't, you'll only be looking at OHA. And then there are some general regulations that apply to all industries. And then there are some regulations that apply to specific industries. So you're going to want to be clear that you're either an industry that's not additionally regulated and just follow the general guidelines, or if you are additionally regulated, to learn what those guidelines are. All right, so what are some of the guidelines, the general guidelines? So a lot of this is the usual things that are old hat for all of us now. So the 6 feet of physical distancing is required, face coverings required. You have to provide the face coverings or masks, although employees can wear their own. So they can choose to wear a mask even if they're not required. So these are some of the general things that should have been happening already for quite a long period of time. In addition to looking at the individual employees, looking at the workplace. So you want to be cleaning and sanitizing. There's a schedule by which you need to do that. You need to provide time for your employees to be able to clean, wash their hands. And so just to generally make sure that not only are people doing what they need to be doing, but that the place itself is being cleaned. And again, these would be regulations that have been in effect for a while. So probably most of you are aware of these. These are some of the newer regulations that came out in November. And now I have been in effect for a few months, but you want to make sure that you have posters from OSHA and from OHA as well. So you want to make sure you have your posters up. You can likely download them from those websites. You're going to want to have a mask required sign. You're going to want to make sure that you've optimized the HVAC system if you are responsible for the HVAC system. Oftentimes, people are thinking that the HVAC system is the responsibility of the landlord. You'll want to check your lease to see, is this your responsibility or somebody else's responsibility? And if it's your responsibility, you're going to want to make sure that it is clean and has been serviced and optimized if possible. For employee training information, you're going to want to make sure that you've done some trainings around what these new regulations are. So you can't put in regulations and expect your employees to know them if you haven't clearly communicated these regulations to them. And so you want to make sure you have a training and show that you've done a training. And you want to make sure that the training is done in a way that they understand. So if you have staff that are mainly Spanish speaking, you can't just provide them English language materials. You have to make sure that it's done in a way that they are going to understand. And you want to make sure that the employees have the ability to give you feedback, and OSHA has materials that can be used. So you don't have to go and create your own information and training session. You can use the materials that OSHA provides and should have provided them in a variety of languages as well. So these are for all workplaces, regardless of if you have employees or not. In addition, you'll want to make sure that you do an exposure risk assessment. And this is something that was required by the end of the year last year. So if you haven't done that, you're going to want to make sure that you figure out what you need to do and get that done. And this is going to be, what is the, as it says in its title, what's the risk to being exposed? And make sure that you have plans in place for that risk level. And if you have more than 10 employees, this needs to be written. And again, OSHA has a sample you can use, but you want to make sure that you have it in writing. So if somebody comes in and asks for it, that they can see that. In addition, a second plan that's needed is the infection control plan. So this is exposure to risk, what's your risk of being exposed, and then what's your plan if you have been exposed. So you look at your risk assessment, which you do first, and then you figure out, okay, what are the things that we are going to do, and have a plan in place if there is an exposure. All right, so those are again requirements for all workplaces. In addition, there are some notices and testing that you should have. So this is like, make sure that there's a notice procedure for if there is an outbreak or if somebody has tested positive. And again, OSHA has a model procedure. So this may feel very overwhelming, like, oh my goodness, I have to do all these different plans. I have to follow all these different rules. It is a lot. It's a lot that's being asked of small businesses. I don't want to minimize that, but I would suggest looking to see what resources have already been created and then reviewing them. Do they apply to your business? And if they apply to your business and they work for your business structure and you understand them, you can go ahead and adopt them as your own. Also, know that you're not alone in figuring these out. This is something that an attorney can help you go through, or even a business advisor can help you go through, and make sure that you're understanding what are your requirements, and also that your plan is something that's workable. So sometimes people will create these plans, or they'll just take a plan that's been, posted by OSHA, but they won't actually have looked at it. And so when something happens, when someone is exposed, they had this plan, but they actually don't really know what the plan is. So make sure that you have a plan that's going to be workable for your business and that you understand the business, the plan. And finally, if someone is sick, there's a set of things that you need to be doing, telling the employee to stay home, allowing the employee to work from home if that's an option. For our clinic, for example, we have been working from home. And so obviously, if someone is sick and not feeling well, they shouldn't have to be working. But if they are recovering, but still contagious and they can work, then that would be something that we would need to allow them to do. And if a worker has been out for a long period of time, recovering from COVID, and we've seen that some people have recoveries in the months, they should be entitled to allowed to return to their job if it's still available. So this is something I would say, if you have someone that goes out with COVID, doesn't come back for a while, and then they're ready to come back, if you don't have a job that's available for them, I would definitely talk with an attorney about figuring out what's the best way to move forward. Even if before they want to come back, if you know that this is going to be an option, that somebody may be out for a while and that you're trying to figure out what your plan is, it would be a really good time to talk with an attorney to make sure that your plan works with the regulations. All right, and like I said before, OSHA has a lot of materials. They also have free consultations. We have talked to them many times, trying to figure out, especially as things were changing so frequently, and they have been just really helpful and really nice. They're really wanting to work with businesses. They recognize how hard this has been on small businesses over the last year. And so they're not trying to put something in place so they can come and give you fines. They find very few businesses. The few businesses that they have found, it was after a lengthy process of working with them. And usually they were large employers who had a lot of resources, who were choosing not to follow the regulations after employees had become sick. So it's only been in these very extreme situations where there have been fines. But for the most part, OSHA is really trying to help businesses be safer. So I would say highly encourage people talking with them. We have their information here. You can Google them and give them a call. There are some industry specific guidelines. So the guidelines that I talked about were general guidelines. There are a lot of industries that have additional guidelines, and I just listed them here. We do have additional presentations for the ones that are in bold that are on our website. But I would say if you fit under one of these specific industries that have additional guidance, it's important to make sure you don't just understand the general guidance, but that you also understand what's specific to your business. So, all right. So a lot on regulations. I am going to go ahead and move over to the lease topic. And these are not really connected other than they are things that you need to follow, and they have changed because of COVID. So those are really the only connections. This has really been, I was thinking we've done a lot of presentations. This is going to be more of a summary presentation, bringing in some new things. And I would say that some of the biggest issues that we have had people come to us with are understanding the regulations and also trying to figure out how to pay their lease with the changing circumstances. So as many of you, I'm sure, are aware, for those of you who had leases, there was a period of time from April to September when there was a moratorium on evictions, and also allowed people to delay those rent payments for that period of time. They were not forgiven, they were just allowed to be delayed. And then starting in October, regular rent was due again, and the evictions could happen again. So if you're a business who did not pay during that period of time, but started paying in October, you should have the right to stay in your space. They cannot evict you. They also cannot give you any late fees or penalties as long as you gave them full notice about the fact that you were taking advantage of that moratorium. However, having said that, we're coming up fairly soon on that deadline. When it first came into effect, it was, wow, okay, we got 6 months until we have to think about it. Now it's really upon us. It's just over a month. And so for those of you who have that period of time that they did not pay back, starting on April 1st, you can now be charged late fees and penalties for that period, basically last summer, that you didn't pay. Also means that you can be evicted on that period of unpayment. So it's important for those of you who did take advantage of that to recognize that if you have a landlord that is not interested in giving you sort of additional support around this situation, they do now have the right to start looking at eviction or late fees and penalties for that period of time. Hopefully, I'm hoping many landlords will not. I'm hoping that most landlords will recognize that things have not changed significantly and continue to allow you to have that additional time. And they certainly can do that. It's certainly the ability of the landlord to allow an extended payment or to cancel late fees or penalties from that period of time. But if you have a landlord who's not interested in doing that, or a landlord who's really wanting your space, which we've seen occasionally, they now have the ability to use the law to force you to leave. I've had some people tell me, but I thought that they extended that. There was a lot of confusion. What they extended was residential, not commercial. So if you're thinking about your own personal lease where you live, that's a different story, but this is for the commercial properties. We were hoping that there would be an extension. There wasn't an extension. We were hoping that there would be some additional funds, and there should be some additional funds coming down. I haven't actually been paying attention in the last week, but I believe that they still have not. They have a big fund that they're going to use. They're going to be giving that money out to help with commercial lease payments. And that is something that will be able to help with this kind of back rent that's due, what was used during that, what was not paid during the moratorium. And hopefully that will be distributed very soon before March 1st. That's a goal. I don't know, Emma, do you have any more information about that? Like I said, I haven't checked in about a week. I know that they were still developing guidelines around how they were going to give out that rent.
Yeah, I do. I can read some of the information that was provided by Washington County. So yes, Washington County is in the process of tightening some of that information so that we know um, who and when and how much our tenants will be receiving. So this is the information I have specifically for Washington County. I imagine it's for the whole state. That there will be resources similar available throughout the state. Um, some of the businesses that didn't get some of the support were things like businesses like skating rinks and bowling alleys, and that was last week. Um, they announced a new application, $10,000 grant for those businesses. Those businesses were not able to open through the entire year. Um, and so that was one of the agendas for the business advocacy for Washington County. And the second one is the moratorium. Hasn't been finalized, but we should know pretty soon. And of course, I will provide that information to everyone as soon as it does come through.
It is definitely one of those, we were hoping to have that information. Well, I mean, we've been waiting for that information since December, and then we heard it was going to be mid-February. Well, we're past mid-February now. So I know that everyone has a lot on their plate, but it is something that I think all of us are keeping in mind and looking. And, you know, as we've always said, a lot of the newspapers are also paying attention to this situation. And so oftentimes the first time that I'm hearing about it is when I get a notification on my phone because the Statesman Journal or the Oregonian or one of the Willamette Week, one of the local newspapers has put something out, and then I'm able to go and find out more information. So definitely keep an eye on that. Also checking in with your business advisors, and usually we'll find out and then we'll probably refer you over to business advisors. We can help with applications, although usually it's business advisors are able to do that very well. So, and they often tend to do a lot of them. So usually they know the tricks because once it comes out, they have a lot of businesses that they're working to help. So that's the general information, as I said before, how to keep track, not only the generally looking at newspapers, but also keeping track of these websites are going to help you understand what's changed. Yeah, I feel like, again, this is a page that we have put out before. It's been a marathon over the last almost year. And hopefully we won't have a lot of new regulations coming out. Hopefully we'll just get some information on some lease repayment back of those funds. And then hopefully there won't be new regulations coming out, and we can slowly see those counties go down and have more and more green and fewer regulations. And we can move forward to the other legal challenges that the SBLC was usually handling in non-pandemic times. So thank you so much for listening. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this, and let me know if you have. I think we'll go ahead and stop the recording if that is okay. I don't know if I have the ability to do that, or Emma, if you'd like to do that.